BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Drum and bass is everywhere. The fast-beating heart of your workouts, the pure release of your nights out. And it's still breaking new ground. This is the story of how it rose and rose. I'm DJ Flight, and you're listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass, episode 4, Rebirth. Drum and bass arrived in the new millennium without chemistry, one of the purest champions of this music from the very start. DJ Storm, her best friend and constant partner behind the decks, had to figure out how to move forwards without her, if she even wanted to carry on.
The weirdest thing for me and Kemi is that we shared a set of records and we never played each other's tunes. So now I suppose that first gig back at Bar Rumba, I've got to play her set pretty much, which was a bit off key.
At Bar Rumba, a central London venue that would become a focal point for drum and bass into the 2000s, Storm had her first experience of being in the booth, alone, although she wasn't, really.
I mean, everybody was fantastic. The whole of my agency turned up and they're all behind me in the box and I just almost fell to pieces. But luckily, Brian G told me about Nine Night and how you do it in Jamaica and how you celebrate people. And to add to the whole thing of Kemi passing, she didn't want to be old, she wanted to be notorious, and she always thought she'd die young.
I was there that night, sometime in July 99. I can remember the atmosphere, a sense of grief, a little tension too. People hoping Storm would do well. But more than anything, it was a celebration of Chemistry's career, her passion, of the whole scene. It was the way Kemi would have wanted.
That night I did celebrate what we'd achieved, and a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you're going to come back?" And I was like, oh my God, if I didn't, I think Kemi would actually come and haunt me, you know, like every night, like be a poltergeist or something, because we worked hard to get where we were. The beauty of Kemi finding this music was, for the first time in her life, she was accepted just for who she was. And I think she embraced it. I saw Kemi blossom from someone who was quite shy and introvert. And I mean, she loved people in this scene. So yeah, Brian giving me that good talking to, making me think of all about the fun times me and Kemi had together, made me just, okay, this is it. You make or break right now. And you know, you've got lots of people behind you in case you falter, and they can just step in.
Only knows how you make me feel.
Storm and Chemistry were very instrumental in my own rise as a DJ. I idolised them. I remember giving them copies of my very first mixtapes in the hope of getting some advice and being seen. One night back in late 98, early 99 at Swerve, Fabio's weekly soulful event in central London, they'd asked me for a new tape as they wanted to bring another woman into Metalheads. That cassette was passed on to Goldie.
It was interesting with you and your tape because we didn't tell Goldie you were a girl, right? Because we didn't say that to people when we first started. We said, we've got this tape from this DJ, you need to hear it. Listen what this DJ's doing to B-sides. And he listened and he was like, yeah, okay.
Chemistry may not have been present physically to see my first set at Heads, but I felt her, and she's never far away from my thoughts. I know the same is true for so many others.
One of my favourite drum and bass acts when I first got into the music were Chemistry and Storm, and travelled to Bristol to see them play. That was kind of a big deal for me.
Producer and DJ High Contrast. Like me, when he was starting out, he made a habit of seeing the duo whenever he could.
I actually bumped into them in the hallway of Emporium in Cardiff and was kind of starstruck. They were really nice, and I said, I'm producing tunes, I'd love to get you some music, and they were very encouraging, and so that was always like a goal of mine. Sadly, Kemi passed away not long afterwards, which was a huge blow to the whole scene and everyone who knew her. I feel like they're such important figures, in general, but like for me personally, yeah, they've been musical heroes.
In the new millennium, High Contrast would become massive. He was part of an exciting wave of new energy entering the scene. Original heavyweight Fabio thought new blood was exactly what was needed for the noughties.
From about 96, 97, the music then went a little bit wayward. It kind of lost its spark because all the big artists were signed. They weren't really doing what they wanted to do.
In the middle of this existential moment for the music, something new arrived.
Strangely enough, off the back of that came garage. And then garage became an underground force. And it became a real kind of like, oh, drum and bass has got really boring now. We want something new. I remember speaking to Brian G and we were like, I don't know how much longer drum and bass is going to last. Women weren't going out as much anymore. Crowds were kind of like, it was a lot of guys stroking their chins.
While D&B had only been getting darker and colder, UKG was slower, smoother, and viewed as sexier. It had more songs.
So I was kind of a little bit, what happens now? And then Calibre happens. You know, Calibre changed everything for me. I've met him and he changed my life.
We arrived at a period of time in drum and bass where all of the major dance magazines were printing articles about the death of drum and bass, which in retrospect made me think like how stupid journalism is, because you can't rub out genre. Like once there's a form in the universe, it's gonna persevere, regardless of whether you like it or not.
Calibre is much loved and still one of D&B's most prolific producers. When he first exploded onto the scene, it felt like he'd come from nowhere, but he'd been experimenting with different ways of making music for years. Back home in Northern Ireland, something just shifted when he heard D&B.
It would have been mid to early 90s. There were shops in Belfast that were stocking it, and my brother brought it home, and the first reaction to it was, I thought, this is all loads of drums. I didn't really get the bass part of it until I actually started to go to the clubs, and then I could hear it there, and I guess that's a bit more of an epiphanal experience then, where you get a picture of how it's supposed to work. And so it's like this spectrum of bass and percussive angles that really interested me, because I was trying to write music for years before, and I was mostly trying to make techno and 130 break beats sort of stuff. And so when drum and bass came along, and because I was a drummer as well, it seemed to be a whole world of possibilities.
For Calibre, drum and bass was the sound of different cultures and people meeting in the most exciting way.
When I came to London for the first time, when I went to Music House and Velvet Rooms and Charing Cross, and all these sort of fundamental first experiences seemed to confirm what I felt about the music, that it was this convergence of ideas and cultures and people.
The openness of this culture most appealed to him, which maybe explains why he felt free to put his own different spin on the music. Calibre tunes were more melodic and soulful than a lot of the stuff about at the time.
I loved writing stuff in a more musical tip because it felt like as if you could tell a story somehow. But I remember I was living with my parents at the time, and I was listening to Radio 1, and Fabio told me that he was going to play the tune on radio, and I was just a wee fella from Belfast, you know. It's such a precious period, I think.
As I said before, kicked off the show with Calibre and a track entitled Feeling, forthcoming creative source from a marvellous EP that we're going to be bringing out in a little while. So watch out for this man, Calibre.
Appreciation ran both ways. Fabio did give Calibre his first big break, but Calibre also completely revitalised the whole movement for Fabio.
I've been really lucky in every time where it looks like a door's closed. I found something to drag me out of the doom and gloom and thinking, oh, what do I do now? And then 2000, 2001 was the Liquid Funk era. Liquid
Funk, coined by Fabio himself, was exactly what it sounds like. Loose, dreamy, soulful. DJ Mag's Carl Loban.
Perhaps coming out into this new century, there was a bit more positivity in outlook. This seemed to bring forward a whole new kind of like subgenre, the liquid funk thing that Fabio had kind of developed as his lane at the time. Produced like Calibre, Marcus Intellects, doing more soulful stuff, and the birth of Hospital Records brought some of the happy, soulful side of the sound to the fore.
Liquid Funk connected with audiences and creators further and further afield. Before he knew it, Brian G, creator of V Recordings and the legendary Movement Party, thrown on Thursday nights at Bar Rumba, found himself cutting deals with Brazilian artists like DJ Markey.
We we brought him back to London and we made him play at Bar Rumba. I knew once people saw him, their reaction would be just mind blown away. And people were. The first night at Bar Rumba, he blew up the place, man.
D&B had always been about the meeting point of different cultures, but crucially, this was something new at a time when the genre could have flatlined.
With the Brazilian thing coming through, it just opened up the whole Latin world. It's a big world, you get what I'm saying?
Throughout this whole time, Fabio and Groove Rider's Radio 1 show was a constant presence, guiding the scene through its expansion.
It was blowing things up differently. We were getting letters from Dominican Republic, South Africa, all over the world, people listening into the shows. It felt so universal. I know people that used to send tapes of our radio shows to America and Canada and places like that. It's not like now where you've got the internet, you can listen to anything from around the world. You couldn't. It felt like we'd landed and we were here and we were missionaries. We were getting tunes from everywhere because it was such a big thing.
Back home, a host of new talent embodied the optimism of the 21st century, but Storm also saw something nostalgic about the new wave.
To me, Photek was a 21st century junglist and Calibre a junglist. And I say that because of the bass to a certain extent. And I mean, Calibre was straight away, you could see this guy had got something. And High Contrast just came quite full force, I feel.
Even High Contrast, an artist who would find his share of mainstream success over the next decade, he felt that OG jungle influence too.
When I got into drum and bass, it was very techie sounding, in that period around 97, 98. A lot of jump up. I quite like the jump up, but I was really looking for the kind of more soulful sounds and the kind of housey vocals that you would hear in early jungle, an era that I had missed out on, but I was finding out about through crate digging. But I was like, where are these vocals and nice pads and chords and things? Fabio and Groove Rider's show on Radio 1 was really just fundamental to me. I had to listen to it every week and started to hear Fabio talking about, as you say, liquid funk, and Groove Rider pushing the kind of future funk angle. So it was really exciting to start hearing these more melodic, soulful sounds coming through. When I heard How You Make Me Feel by Marcus Intellects and SD Files and the early Calibre tunes, it was just such a magical moment because I felt like, wow, I'm on the right track. There's other people doing this and they're having real success, making a mark in this scene with this kind of sound that was actually getting quite a bit of pushback from my perspective. When I was trying to play more soulful sounds, I'd have people coming up to me being like, why aren't you playing, these heavy Dillinger tunes?
The old guard was adapting to welcome in the new sound as well. Shy FX had released banger after banger for almost a decade already, but Shake Your Body, a 2001 collaboration with T-Power and Die, made them household names in 2002 when it hit number 7 on the UK singles chart.
Well, I was so excited because he was on top of the pops. But it was so brilliant, right? And we were dancing around the room and we were so excited. Because actually now it sounded pretty good because our tellies had moved on. We got some bass. You could have surround sound then. So now you were almost able to understand it now. It was a great tune, right? And one that, of course, you could all sing along to.
All movements need their anthems. Shake Your Body is undeniably that. Others, like Shimon and Andy C's Body Rock, which charted at number 28 the previous year, all contributed to a renewed lease of life for the genre that some love to claim had already died. 2002 brought about another victory.
This is One Extra.
BBC Radio 1 Extra, a brand new digital station launched with a dedicated 11 hours of drum and bass every week. It felt like a true acknowledgement of the scene's staying power.
Well, I think it was always exciting, right, to anything that's a little bit more overground, because then you obviously get to more people, and that's always what we wanted, do you know what I mean? I don't think drum and bass will ever be what you'd call completely mainstream. There are certain acts, but I think it was a good stepping stone to that, and then to highlight some different people that maybe you haven't ever heard on the radio before. So that was, it was a joy, really, One Extra, and it obviously gave you a chance to get on the radio.
Gave me my second big break. It was a huge learning curve and a really amazing experience. but we'll talk about more of that in the next episode.
Yo, one extra massive. DJ Flight, the next chapter. Deal with the matter, deal with it proper. Rinse it out.
You've been listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass with me, DJ Flight. Hit subscribe to get new episodes as soon as they drop.
Hello, I'm Stefan, the BBC's gaming reporter. I'm also the host of Press X to Continue, the BBC's gaming podcast, and I think you might like it.
Press X to continue.
On the podcast, we talk gaming news and reviews.
We had such a nice early start to this year with February just having great game after great game after great game.
We discuss some of the biggest games of the moment.
The characters all have their experiences that they bring to it, and you feel, kind of part of that puzzle.
And we get into some of the things the gamers are talking about right now.
Elden Ring is a game where it wants you to kind of talk about it with other people, to kind of decipher different things and discover different things. Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
That's Press X to Continue, the BBC's gaming podcast, available only on BBC Sounds.